hey there, thanks for stopping by and taking a listen. I just wanted to share the pleasure that I had recently of spending time, well, I guess I would say really rich time, with this guy by the name of Jared Hartmann. You know, it was interesting because we were having this conversation at this restaurant. And so, you know, in this recording, there's a lot of background noise. So you guys are just going to have to be okay with that. But his mom and dad joined us. His mom and dad are Chris and Belinda Hartmann. Some of you may know them. They hosted the very first Tohu Bohu Meditation Retreat in Leavenworth, Washington. And it was beautiful. There were many of you guys that were there, and I know that you could say the same thing about how wonderful it was. Those of you guys that weren't able to make it, you're going to want to hop on to the next retreat. I believe it's going to be coming in the spring of 2022, so keep a lookout for that. The Tohu Bohu Meditation Retreat in Leavenworth, Washington. So now back to my story my conversation with Jared. It was really rich time, and I loved every minute of it. And Jared, I just want to give a shout out to you and tell you thank you. I have a lot of respect for you and admiration for the journey that you walked. You know, for all of those out there, some of you guys may have heard me say, I know what I know, but I don't know what you know. And I always get inspired by other people's stories. So Jared, again, thank you. Hey, Jared, can I ask you a few questions?
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, all right. You know what? Heard a little bit of your story,
Okay.
and I wanted to just kind of step a little bit deeper into this because I think you've got some great, wisdom, understanding, learning, all of that. So, okay, do you mind if you take a few minutes on the front end and just kind of give us a snippet as to what we're looking at? Tell us a little bit about your, where you've been, your past, what you're learning. Oh gosh, I know. That's a great question, right?
Yeah.
Rose, how far do you want me to go back?
Yeah.
You just share whatever, be free to share whatever you share. And then here's the hard part is that I have a tendency to step in and be like, wait, I got a question. So.
It's kind of hard without a little direction.
Okay.
But,
okay.
I don't know, I used to do drugs and now I don't.
Okay, that's, okay. So tell us about that. What was your drug of choice?
Meth.
Okay, all right. And okay, so tell me about that scene. How long were you
About 4
doing
years.
this? Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah, there were parts that were challenging, I guess. Being homeless was difficult sometimes. I don't really like to give stuff power over me by saying it was hard for me,
Sure.
But
Because you were enjoying being homeless.
sometimes
Okay.
there's a freedom with it, I guess.
Yeah.
But I guess the hardest thing for me was losing connection with my family and the people I care about.
Yeah, for sure.
Losing all my material possessions that I've worked years to attain. Cars, houses, everything.
Yeah.
Eventually it takes everything,
Wait, when did you start to realize that eventually it takes everything?
When you see it all the time, when you see other people with stuff, you see them again a couple years later, and they got nothing.
So
Nobody really gets out with anything substantial other than lessons and experience.
Well, okay, so we've been at this meditation retreat for the last 2.5 days, and there's been some amazing things that we've learned. So tell us a little bit about that. What's your perspective on this? I mean, because you have an experience that maybe some of us others don't, and there's going to be people that are going to be able to relate to you. So what tell us about that. What have you gained over the last 2.5 days?
Over the last 2 days, I gained deeper understanding about Kirby's teachings and the actual application of the teachings in everyday life, which is something I've always struggled with, is how do I apply all this knowledge
Right.
into something good, tangible, right? And yeah, just it's nice because like, no, there's things I can practice and get better at
Yeah.
to do good things for other people, you know.
Okay, but wait a second. Don't you think that you did some good things for other people when you were homeless or when you were
Oh yeah, you always try to do
sharing
nice
your
things for.
resources or
You always try to do nice stuff for people, lessen their suffering,
yeah.
even while you're suffering.
So how
You're always
do you-
trying to make life as good as it can be
Yeah.
right then, you know. And some things are just out of reach, you know. So you just do what you can in that moment.
And so how do you think that's different now? You know, sharing your resources back then. How do you think about that differently now? You know, because the world would say, or most people would say, oh no, that was wrong. You shouldn't have been sharing those resources with other people.
Oh, those resources.
Those resources. Yes.
I mean, at the time, that was the best way to help a person's day out, you know. And now it's not. And now today, the best way to help somebody out is different, you know, whatever it may be. Give them some cash, give them a ride home, buy them lunch, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're talking about two different worlds, so you know,
Right,
when
absolutely.
You're sucked into this other world, and so the rules are different.
The rules are different. That's
You know.
really good. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. So, okay, so Chris, earlier you were talking about the polarity. You know, you were talking about polarity and you were talking about the, you know, both sides. We think something's good or bad. You know, and leading into what Jared was talking about with, you know, we were talking about sharing resources. Okay, well, this part of society would say, well, that's bad. And you were talking about polarity. Do you remember?
Yeah. Well, I think we always look back in our past and say that, you know, there was good and bad in our past, but when we really live in the now, we're looking back and saying, oh, that was all reconciled, so it's all perfect. What Jared went through during that time, yeah, emotionally at the moment it was hard. But now we look back and it created a Belinda Hartman and a Chris Hartman, and it's perfect because in him at every moment we're perfect in him. And coming to that realization rather than just beating ourselves up to say, oh, we were terrible parents, or, you know, Jared was a sinner, or he was doing wrong. I look at it and say, no, that was the sufferings of Christ. And what Jared is today is perfect. And the past doesn't exist. There was no bad in what he did. And to be able to allow that blood to reconcile that in my spirit, I don't have to go, oh, geez, Jared, it is just completely cleansed, completely forgiven. There is no moment that he wasn't in the right to change me. You know, I mean, and I think that's what's interesting is the interconnectivity that we all have. You know, talking with you, or Belinda and I having something going on, or seeing Kirby, or people that don't like the coffee, or whatever it happens to be. It comes out to saying, you know, I mean, it just is, and it makes me better. And anything that God brings to us to make us like His Son, because that's what the Father is seeking, is that Adam before the fall. And if that's what it takes to get there, if that's what it took Jared to get where he is today, more like Adam before the fall, because that is the Father's desire, is that cool of the morning walk. Bring it on. Bring it on.
Yes.
well, yeah, I'm not gonna, like, I don't live with regret
Yeah.
or guilt, you know. Like, I'm glad I went through all those things. They suck.
They suck.
Like, it was horrible.
Right?
You know, but I'm glad it happened because I like who I am now
Yeah.
a lot better than who I was before.
Sure.
And I would agree with that too, because who we are now is so much better than who we were before, because we, you know, living without the idea of polarity, Jared was doing something that to us was scary and wrong, in my book at that time, wrong. So I thought the only way to fix that was to separate from him. You know, so we cut off contact with him, only realizing that the only way you're going to ever really do anything is to reconcile. Jesus came to reconcile all things to him, and that you understand that Jared was doing the best that he knew in the situation he was in, and we were doing the best we knew as parents, and you reconcile the polarities of that all together. And when we reconnected and came to that point of there is no separation between us, that's when everything changed. And everything changed very quickly from that point.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, he actually
so-
used the separation to draw me back, because what I missed most was my parents, you know, and so, and I knew they were always there, waiting for me to do the right thing and get clean and stuff, and it was just eventually that seed was planted, and knowing that I had that backup if I wanted to get clean. I could move back into the fullness of that relationship with no judgment and have their full support again. And that seed that they planted when they told me that is what finally blossomed. And one day I'd had enough. And so I called them. They picked me up. And here we are.
That is amazing.
Well, and a little bit of the background to that too, because about 2 weeks before all this transpired, I was on a trip, and I shared this in Florida, but I was on a trip and the Holy Spirit just said, you know, Lord just prompted me to pray in the Spirit. So a couple hours later, as I pray in the Spirit in the car, I'm on this long road trip, my windshield opens up into this visions of heaven. I'm in the courtroom, or what I perceive to be the court, and the Spirit spoke and says, you need to renounce everything that you've named him. Because I had called him these things. I had called him the drug addict. I had called him, you know, I had, you know, just horrible intent out of my voice of what I had named him. And so as I went through and repented and renamed him, he says, I denounce, he's not a drug addict. He is a son of the Most High God. He has a destiny and a fulfillment that is greater than any man ever. And to be able to identify that, and when that broke and that closed up in that vision, it wasn't 2 weeks that because I was holding him bondage by how I framed him, by how I collapsed the matrix around him to say, you can't leave because I've identified you as a drug addict. But when I identified him as a son in redemption as my son, that broke, and he was able to be free. And I didn't realize that I was the possessor of his freedom. And I went, oh wow, because that was the power that I had in naming him. But when I named him Jared Hartmann again, and when I named him the Son of the Most High, when I named his destiny and his prophetic calling over his life that we knew from when he was in the womb, when we saw that, and we said, he is your son. You have called him to a destiny of transformation of lives that no one else can touch but him.
Yeah.
And we wanted that to see that come down and be, you know, the scroll to be opened.
Wow.
So that he had the opportunity to walk in the cool of the morning.
That is
because
amazing.
That's his destiny.
Yes. This whole thing is reminding me of the story of the prodigal son. You know, and you know, I just want to honor you, Jared, because what you had to walk through in life, and you know, I mean, part of it was your choice, but you know, and the sufferings of Christ and all of that. But it was actually, you were given a gift, and you were given the gift out. You know, because without you going through what you went through, your parents, and thank you, Mom and Dad, for embracing it and flowing with it the way that you did and growing with it the way that you did, because now you have that higher level of revelation oh my gosh, it's just amazing how the whole thing, and you can see it, even though the world would typically look at it as being, a hard thing and this and that, but it's actually a gift. And we've been given a gift because, in Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs 14:4 or 4:14, one of those, talks about where there is no ox, the stable is clean. Okay, well, the strength that Jared has now, because he was in a messy stable, he knows that deal and knows how to clean it. And the world is just getting messier, right?
But I would go one step further now on that prodigal son that I don't think everybody looks at, is that the son, the father, his heart changed at some place. That wasn't an easy situation for him to go through, to see his firstborn go out and walk. He may have had reports, he may not have, but there was some transformation that made him to be able to pick up his clothes and run to his son. There was a transformation in his heart. So there was two sides to that.
Yeah.
Well, he had to be watching for the son to be coming back, to beat the crowds out there, because if the crowds had beat him, had gotten to the son before him, had a tradition about that. But the father had to get there first. He had to be watching. For sure. So we were looking for Jared to come in.
Yeah. So what do you think about that, Jared? I mean, what do you think about all of us, older people? Yeah. I'm curious to hear your perception now.
About what?
Just about what we were just talking about, and sharing the other perspective. How does that, what about your parents? How did your, if somebody's listening to this and they're a parent dealing with some of the same thing, I mean, what are some of the things that you would coach, parents on? How would you do this?
I guess the most powerful thing, like I said before, was just knowing that they were always there. But I had to make the right decision and do the right thing to get back in to the full, and I had to do my part in mending that relationship too, and I had to show them that that's what I wanted, and I knew as soon as I did that there'd be no judgment and nothing's ever been thrown in my face, it doesn't come up, and like you've seen how they look at it, it's like it was we gleaned positivity from it. It's not like we look back on it with enjoyment, but we look at it as a powerful growing experience together,
Yeah.
But I can look at it and say thank you. Thank you for going through it. I mean, because if you had no, I wouldn't be the same preserver.
That's so true.
So thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be the same.
Thank you.
I wouldn't have the same moments of compassion. And now seeing you grow into the man that you are, and that heart, and now with the teachings that we're learning, where you're going to be with this, how you're going to be able to transform. People, they wrestle with this whole drug addiction thing, but you have a place and a perspective and a way to engage these elements now that nobody else has. You have a unique aroma before the Father, because He experienced the life through it, and it's so good. I just get overwhelmed with gratitude. Gratitude of what changed in Belinda and I, the gratitude that I saw her grow in stature as a woman of God, a woman of prayer, and engaging into this, and pressing in when it was so hard. It just, I thank her.
Okay, so I'm pausing the conversation for just a moment because of what is about to take place. It was amazing, and I have to include you guys in this part of our conversation. So, Chris, the dad, Jared's dad, reaches over, grabs a chip, and breaks it in pieces and hands each one of us a piece. Then we pick up the water, we clink our glasses, and we take communion together. You guys, it was so amazing, so anointed at this little Mexican restaurant in Leavenworth, Washington. Here we are having lunch, taking communion with chips and water.
Kirby did that communion where he gives, breaks the bread and says, "This is your body. Thank you for laying it down for me. This is your body. Thank you for your suffering. This is your body. Thank you for breaking it for me."
Because Mom's the one that answered the phone. Right?
Yeah, I was answered. Yeah.
She'd answer the phone. For a long time, then neither of them answered.
That's
Well,
awesome.
I got convicted.
But that's how it had to be that way for a little bit. That's the thing. Like,
That was my glass. I'm sorry.
But I was convicted by someone who we would consider a total, agnostic, non-believing, New Ager. Of why are you cutting off contact with your son? Don't you love him? And I was like, who are you to talk? You're not even a Christian,
Right.
But of course now in polarities,
Right.
that guy had the answer. He taught us how to step outside, how to be the observer, how to observe ourselves when we were triggered. That's what I think made a difference for Jared. And we had to be open to learning from people that we in Christendom would think less of.
Right, exactly. So good.
Yeah.
So good. Yep. Oh my gosh, what a fabulous story. You guys, thank you. Thank
I
you.
hope we covered it good.
We did. It was good. It was good and it was powerful, and I loved taking communion in the midst of this conversation with
Oh,
chips
yeah, that was good.
and water, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Wow, you guys, what a great conversation I had with the Hartmanns. I was so grateful for their willingness to be vulnerable and transparent. And it's amazing when you listen to them and you listen to their story and you can really get an understanding of the power of the technology of love. So until next time, thanks for listening.